Hey, Sens fans, what's up? It's a new season, new dawn, good things on the horizon. We hope it is now the sixth year of us doing the Senstennial Podcast. So
Oh
that's
my God.
very exciting.
Oh
How many of
my.
those were like pandemic years where there was like 10 games that we could talk about?
Yeah, basically. Actually, I should say 6 years very loosely. I
Yeah.
believe it's
Six
been
seasons in a movie,
six,
actually.
yeah, something like that. I know we started off in 2020, and it's
Yeah.
it's been a long road since, but I guess we've done 5 seasons of podcast episodes, and I
Right.
don't know, maybe I put an extra season in there somewhere. So maybe a little bit of a stretch, say 6 years, but nearly 5 years. We're coming up on 5 years. So yeah, anyway, today, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, you will get the first part of this episode, and we will release two more parts that you'll get to see in this upcoming week. For the audio listeners, this is a one-shot episode. You get everything all in one. So those of you who are watching on YouTube, if you just want to get all your content right now and you don't want to have to look at our mugs, then you can go and check out Spotify or what have you, any of those audio platforms, and you can watch the whole thing right now. There you go. Bada boom, bada bing. Easy. So
And if you like this format, yeah, Matt, I needed to jump in. If you like this format, let us know because we're, on our sixth season. Did we actually determine if it was the sixth season or
So
if it was
so
the fifth
this
season?
this is technically the sixth season of the podcast, but I
Okay.
think we started recording in the 2019-2020 season. So
Yes. Okay.
This season starting will be the fifth season. Wait, no, actually, because we did cover games in like
Yeah.
the
yeah, we did.
short
Yeah.
It was
2020
1920,
season.
Yeah.
2021, 21-22, 22-23,
So
23,
yeah,
24. Oh
6.
yeah, so
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah. All
gosh.
right.
This
This is the
starting year
sixth
is the sixth
season
season.
of the podcast. Anyway, all is this to say, if you like the
They did the
format,
math.
if you like the format of audio on Spotify being long and YouTube being short, let us know and we'll continue to do it. We're testing stuff out. We want to see if maybe the superstition works and this makes the Sens make the playoffs. Who knows? Anyways, Matt, take it away.
Thank you very much. Glad we could all get a little word in there. So the first thing that we wanted to talk to you in today's episode is the PTOs, or professional tryouts, that the Ottawa Senators offered to. First, I'll talk about Calen Addison, but also a surprise one to Nikolay Kulemin. And for those old school Sens fans who are watching or listening, yes, that Nikolay Kulemin. I actually at first thought that it must have been some sort of prospect who hadn't been offered like an restricted free agent or something, who wasn't offered a new deal. I was like, oh, there's no way it's that Nikolay Kulemin. It must be a young guy who just has the same name. And no, I was shocked. I was like, it is the old school former Leafs,
Cool.
Nick Kulemin. Kulemin.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let us first talk though about Calen Addison. So for those of you who don't know, Ottawa offered a PTO to Calen Addison. He is a right-handed defenseman, 5'11". He played for the San Jose Sharks last season. He had 1 goal and 16 assists. Don't put a ton of stock into this because the Sharks were absolute dumpster fire. But he was a minus 38. Rough go with things. So yeah, but he was traded there from Minnesota, where at one point he did look like a promising prospect. He's still fairly young. He's 24. So it seems like the Sens are trying to take a bit of a flyer on him. But I'll let you guys throw in your opinions, and maybe we'll swing it over to Bennett first. And what do you think about Calen Addison coming on to the team on a PTO?
Yeah, I think PTOs are, like you said, they're basically a free swing. You don't have to sign a guy to a contract. You can let them come to your camp, participate, and you could decide whether you want to offer them a deal at the end of it. Typically, a short-term, low-cost deal, just to give them a little bit more of an opportunity to play with the team and see what they can do. And in the case of an older player, maybe, it's just a 1-year contract, a swan song, and that's more or less it. In the case of a younger player, maybe it can become a pathway to cracking the roster full time. So it's an easy way to add a few new faces to your training camp, mix things up a little bit, give some players an opportunity to maybe make the team, or if not, at least to push some of the other guys that are maybe fringe NHLers to up their game and make sure that they take up those roster spots. So I really don't see any potential downside to this move. I think it's a good idea to get some new blood into these training camps, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what new head coach Travis Green makes of not only the PTO players, but a lot of the players that we've been hoping and expecting to see crack the roster this season, and how they're going to fare under him.
Now, one of the biggest criticisms of the Sens is what they would do after their top two pairings with their depth. So, Matt, does Calen Addison, do you think that helps push JBD and Travis Hamonic, or what do you think his role will be coming in on a PTO? And do you think he has a shot at actually earning a contract?
Well, I absolutely think he has a shot at earning a contract because sure, JBD does have a guaranteed contract, but I know that it doesn't look like the Sens have a huge, favor or a favorite towards him. He played so last year. At the end of the season, it really did look like he started picking things up. And I feel like all you have to do is play defense, and you're probably at the same level of Travis Hamonic. But Calen Addison really brings that offensive ability to the third pairing. And it almost seems like a foregone conclusion that Tyler Clevin has that left side spot locked up on the third pair. So I think they're going to look at just about every option they can. And Addison he's very good offensively. Especially if he's given an opportunity to just be kind of sheltered on a third pair, and you have a guy who is, notoriously defensive. He plays with a big body with who's Clevin. But I just feel like Addison's defensive ability and his size may not give him the best foot forward with this version of the Ottawa Senators. But with that said, he probably does have as good a shot as anybody at making the team in that third pair spot because, quite frankly, our defense depth wise isn't the best. One injury and suddenly things start looking a little murky. So having defensive depth of actual NHL players is a good thing, but it's whether or not Addison can actually cut it. And San Jose didn't think he was the right fit. And they were the worst team in the league last year. So I guess we'll have to see how training camp goes and how he does in preseason and all that. But, he was one of the guys that I looked at and said, you should take a flyer on him because he has an ability to score in the NHL. And maybe with the right partner, he can flourish.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting to see that the Sens front office decided to bring him in on PTO. He's very similar to Eric Brandstrom in some ways, a bit of what some people would classify as a smaller defenseman, more of a skill guy. He doesn't have a ton of blocks or hits. That's not his game. It's more just trying to transition the puck, get in on the offense and his defensive game. Um, Less refined. Like Eric Brandstrom, I think, has come quite a way, and he ended up being, I think, not like the best defensive player, but he was a solid defensive player. He was able to play defense, and I know some people would debate that, but hey, it is what it is. That's my opinion. But with Calen Addison, the thing is, I think his ceiling with offensive production is higher than Brandstrom's. And I think that that's where he offers something that Brandstrom wouldn't have. Brandstrom, I think, is 20 points, maybe 30 points if he has like a good year, but he hasn't hit that ever. So I won't say that he's going to. But with Calen Addison, he had 29 points for Minnesota in the 2022-23 season. So for me, you go from having about 30 points, you drop down to 17. It's like, okay, well, what happened? With Minnesota, he got off to a good start. He had 5 assists through 12 games before they traded him to San Jose. And in San Jose, his production just tanked. He ended up finishing out with San Jose only having 12 points in 60 games, one of which was a goal. So for me, it's like, okay, what was the environment that he was in Minnesota? that he may not have been a stellar player since they traded him, but he seemed to be producing. So can they recreate that in Ottawa? Does he have chemistry playing alongside Clevin? It'll be interesting to see what they do in training camp. Also, Travis Green and his infamous drills. It'll be interesting to see if Calen Addison is up to handle that. I mean, obviously he signed or he accepted the PTO from the Sens, so I guess he might know what he's in for. But on that note, I guess if you guys have any other comments on him, like he's an interesting guy. I think that's the thing. He's an interesting player to give PTO to. Like you said, Matt, I think it's worth taking a flyer on. I guess we'll see if he makes the most of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, just last note on him. I mean, like, I fully concur with what Nate was saying. The Senators defense, outside of like Jake Sanderson and most of the time Thomas Chabot, has been kind of sketch for a while. Like Zub has been reliable as well, but like there's really only a few defenders on the roster that you really think that you can kind of like stake your hat on, like night in, night out, reliably perform at a high level. So I think more competition for those places can only be a good thing.
Now, what I was alluding to earlier is the Ottawa Senators also offered a PTO to Nikolay Kulemin, the 38-year-old Russian legend. Now, he played for Toronto for a number of years. His best season with them was when he was 24. He put up 30 goals and ended the season with 57 points. After Toronto, he spent 4 years with the Islanders. He never recreated the point totals that he had in Toronto at his peak, but he still ended up being like a solid depth player for them, was able to be defensively responsible for the most part, and, would chip in here and there on offense, nothing too exciting. But it was just really interesting because the last time he played in the NHL, guys, was 2017-18. That was the season after the Sens went to the Eastern Conference Final.
Yeah.
So to me, this is so interesting because you have a guy like JVR who just had nearly 40 points in a death roll with Boston last season as a guy who's still awaiting a contract. But you give a PTO to a guy who didn't even have 30 points in the KHL last season. Now, fair enough, he played like fewer than 50 games, but still, it's really interesting to kind of see that. So I'll throw it over to you guys. For a guy who hasn't played in the NHL for 6 years, did this move catch you off guard? And what do you think a guy like Nikolay Kulemin can bring to this team in preseason or training camp?
It's kind of hard to say, right? You have a guy who hasn't played in the NHL in quite some time. Played in the NHL at the same time that our GM was playing in the NHL. And like he was a solid depth forward. He was chipping in 20 to 30 points a year. But that's when he was in his 20s. So I just kind of look at this and it makes me wonder, in preseason, you need a minimum amount of veterans in a lineup. And I'm wondering if the Sens didn't feel like they could field or ice a team. Sorry, wrong sport. Ice a team that had the amount of veterans that they were looking for. But along the same vein, Matt, that you made, the point you made, JVR was right there. Like, and he wasn't making a lot last year. And he still doesn't have a contract, still doesn't have a team, doesn't have a PTO. Maybe he's making sort of the decision if he wants to end his playing career or not. But if he's not, then I feel like there are a lot of valuable veterans that were still in the league as of last year that the Sens could have brought in. I mean, how many fans were asking for Cal Clutterbuck and Matt Martin to be brought in some capacity because grit and size and stuff. And I'm just kind of surprised they went with a 6-foot Russian who never really had a good season outside of one 57-point campaign. So it definitely makes you wonder why.
Now, Bennett, what are your thoughts on this one? Because it definitely caught me off guard.
Yeah, obviously not entirely clear to me what the logic is behind this move. I mean, circling back to the PTO point before, it's a free hit, it's a flyer. There is no obligation to sign this guy to a contract if he doesn't do a job in preseason. So, in a sense, it doesn't really matter whether they want to give him an opportunity or not. It does seem weird. I heard on 32 Thoughts, Friedman was saying that Kulemin has like a son who's playing AAA in Toronto or something, and maybe it was just like he really wanted to be back in North America to have the opportunity to be closer to him. I mean, and maybe like Toronto was just like not an option, and so maybe his agent reached out to Ottawa. I don't know. That would be me just purely speculating. Uh, but you know, if that was the case, then again, it doesn't cost the team anything to let him come to camp and just see what he can do. They're not obligated to do anything. Um, it's interesting. I mean, I think like they're both defenders, right? Like
No,
Kulemin's
Kulemin's a
a
forward.
winger.
oh,
Yeah.
he is a winger. Yeah, I mean, I guess like maybe the Sens could use some depth at wing, so maybe that's not the worst idea in the world, but it does seem like it does seem a little odd, and I don't really know what this guy's path to playing would be because like if you're 38 years old, I mean, like I'd rather put any of our prospects in that position and just see what they can do. Because if they can do a job and they do look effective, then the team has control over the player and they can extend them and they can have the best years of hockey ahead of them. Whereas this guy, like, all he's ever gonna be able to give you is like a little bit of juice from like a quickly emptying bottle. So not really sure what the move is here, but I mean, he probably won't make the team. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's almost like bringing in an older Artem Anisimov light to your team, you know? It's a guy who the game I mean, maybe he'll come in and surprise us, I don't know. But it just seems like a player that the NHL has passed him by, and it's just a curious move when you consider some of the other forwards who are still unsigned on the market. Uh, like look at Nick Cousins. He just won a Stanley Cup last season, and it took until what, middle of August for him to get a contract. So and he was apparently looking for a multi-year deal. That wasn't out there. Dude settles at what, a little bit above league minimum.
Mm.
So it's just really interesting to see that the market is already going to be tough for guys who have winning pedigrees. What's it going to be, or why was there interest there in a guy who's been playing in the KHL for the last number of years and seems like the path to the NHL or the journey through the NHL was closed. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see, and I don't want to be, classified as a hater here, but it's interesting. And when I saw it, I thought it was hilarious. I was like, "Oh man, the memes, let's go." And I'm sure the hockey world's reaction on social media was was quite something. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Maybe he can push others.
Yeah, I kind of look like I'm looking at the UFAs now, and like there are a lot of players that I probably would have given a shot over him. But, you know, hey, let's see how it goes. Let's see how it goes.
Indeed. So on that note, for those of you watching on YouTube, thanks for listening to our first mini episode of the season, and we'll catch you in the next one.